In this edition of the Bucs Report, now that the Bucs season is over, what's next? Let's talk about all of that and more next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's go! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. You can find it on the Bucs Report. Just search for the Bucs Report. You can find it on YouTube. Just search for the Bucs Report. And of course, this audio podcast is available wherever you find your audio podcasts. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Bucs MinuteCast. So in this edition of the Bucs Report, we have Garrett Ballard on the show. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
All right, so now that the Bucs season is over, there's a lot of questions out there. The biggest question for me is who is going to be the starting QB for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers next year? It's kind of a thing I've talked about all season on this show, as I did believe that this was going to be the last season of Brady on the Bucs. What are your thoughts going forward at the QB position for the Buccaneers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's the one on the front of everyone's mind, aside from the coaching staff, obviously. There have been some reports that are saying that Brady wasn't necessarily happy with the coaching staff, and the changes could end up being beneficial in his standing with the team and his chances of coming back to the team. Obviously, we won't know until free agency opens. Right now, I'm still leaning towards I think he'll probably retire. Or go somewhere else. I'm leaning that he will not be the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2023. That said, I think it's either going to be Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the interesting position that the Bucs are at right now, is they don't have a lot of space to spend a lot of money, considering that they kind of spread it out over the last few seasons here. There is a true magnetism to Tom Brady that drew a lot of the players that you have on the Buccaneers to this team. So the question then is who is going to be on this team? And ultimately, you think about it. I was listening to the Rick Stroud podcast this morning, and they were like, why would he want to come back here? A lot of these players are not going to be here anymore. So it is an interesting position. So the Bucs are going to go all in on Gabbert or Trask. Trask, who has been redshirted his entire season. And then you have Gabbert, who we know is a solid backup goalie, or excuse me, I do a hockey podcast, quarterback. Who is ultimately going to rise to the challenge? You think about it, Trask. I mean, we don't ultimately know what we have in the tank with him. I mean, if memory serves, I kind of remember he got better as time went along in the preseason. Who is going to be the number one in your assessment?
Yeah, of those two, this is also predicting that they even re-sign Gabbert. He's also a free agent. He might not even come back. That said, I think it's going to have to be Trask. I personally am not super high on Kyle Trask. I'm not totally sold on his NFL abilities. And I went to the University of Florida. Like, I'm a fan. Like, I loved what he did at UF, but I'm not sold on his projection into the NFL. That said, that can all change with the right offensive scheme. If you bring in a really quarterback friendly, really just scheme guys open, there could be many quarterbacks that could succeed in that system. The system that they had run in the past is the opposite of quarterback friendly. It is very demanding on your quarterback. They're asked to do a lot of reads, look a lot of guys off, but asked to do a lot of things just in general. And I mean, there's no better quarterback than Tom Brady for that type of offense. But with that changing, I think the Bucs are going to try and usher in Kyle Trask into that starting role that they, I think, drafted him to take over when Brady's gone. And if they can't get Brady back, I think it makes sense for them to naturally move in that direction.
Because, yeah, that's one of the things that I had heard about is maybe they're going to try and draft another quarterback this offseason. And that seems just like pure lunacy to me
Mm.
because ultimately you don't know what you have in Trask. And it's a good opportunity for him. I mean, they drafted him for a reason. I think to a certain extent, they kind of drafted him so, Tom Brady could serve as his mentor. Kind of an interesting position for the Bucs to be in. And kind of the scary thing is kind of this sinking feeling like, oh no, we're here again. When Tom Brady came to the Bucs, he brought the 3-ring circus with him. There was the paparazzi and all these players wanted to come here. I think the Bucs are going to have to get used to not a lot of Monday night football games, probably not a lot of primetime football games. Are we returning to the Bucs before Tom Brady? I hate to say like the Jameis Winston years. Are we sinking down? It's kind of a scary thought, I got to say, as Bucs fans. I want to drink the creamsicle Kool-Aid like everyone else, but it will make you sick. And so, I mean, just thinking about that, what does this team look like next year with Kyle Trask and Lord knows who else on this team?
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhere in between the worst of the worst and the best of the best. I think we're probably I don't think we'll win the NFC South. We might not make the playoffs, but I think they can be respectable. Now, again, this is all hinging on the offensive coordinator they hire. Because if they hire the wrong one and Kyle Trask is the guy, that is a recipe for disaster, and we could be picking in the top 5. There's a lot of, like you said, a lot of money that we don't have that we had a couple years ago. This team's going to look a lot different next year. Starters are going to be gone, and the free agency is going to be a rocky road for them. So this could be anywhere from a top 10 pick team next year to respectable, but I don't think it'll be NFC favorite or anything like that.
So it's never really, fair to live your life in hindsight. But now that the Buccaneers are past this season, I think that one of the things that will be pondered on for some time to come is why did the Buccaneers squander the last season of Tom Brady on the Bucs, or maybe even the NFL, with an inexperienced coach? And I know what your people are going to say out there. Well, he was 3 years head coach of the Jets. That really means nothing to me. Why didn't you go out and go for your great white whale out there and get someone here that is, comparable to Tom Brady? You have the greatest of all time, and you have an unproven commodity in Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich. It just totally blows my mind. It's like they did not plan for it. Bruce Arians said that he wanted to move on to something else, and they're like, hey, how do you feel about being the head coach? You want to do it? Okay, great. It just seems like such a foolish decision. Jason Light should have to answer to the Glazers for this, and I think that, part of what he did was just a knee-jerk reaction of, I'm going to fire Byron Leftwich. There, I took care of that. I think the onus, a lot of this goes on to Jason Light for not going out and solidifying the head coaching position, and Byron Leftwich for that matter. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I know Bucs Report talked about this, Scott Reynolds. Bruce Arians retired in May. Head coaching candidates are back with their teams if they didn't get hired, and ones that did get hired are with their new teams. You're kind of stuck in a situation where you have to promote internally. And of the two candidates, I do think they chose the right one. I think Bowles is just more so the man for the job than Leftwich, obviously. But we saw Todd Bowles in a system with a rookie offensive coordinator who is calling plays alone for the first time in his career. Yeah, he's been an offensive coordinator, but he's always had Bruce Arians looking over his shoulder. And even the years where in Tampa, when he was doing well, 2020, 2021, play calling wasn't always the best. You could see the writing on the wall from a couple of years back, and now that he was doing it alone, it was obvious that he had no feel for the offense, how to run it. And then Todd Bowles clearly is the same thing. I mean, he's passive. He doesn't really know when to call timeouts. There's just a lot of personnel decisions that are not the best. So that's a tough question because I do think that they, could have done better. I think they probably could have gotten an answer sooner from Bruce Arians. They're like, hey, are you retiring or not? Because if you are, we want to get ahead of this. And then also I think they did the best they could with what they were dealt, with Arians kind of retiring late and leaving that position open for just no real candidates.
Yeah, and kind of an interesting thing for me. And, you can kind of think back about all these mistakes now that the season's over. But, listening to a lot of different people, they said that, Todd Bowles was trying to run the defense and he was trying to be the head coach of the team. And basically, Jason Light said, these are your coaches. You don't really get to, this is what you have. So I don't think you're going to make any changes. Obviously, he's going to have that opportunity next season if, in fact, Bowles, keeps his job on this team. But just taking a look back on it, there's so many different things that were screwed up throughout the season. Clock mismanagement, his being very cautious on fourth down. It is, well known around the NFL now when it's fourth down and in inches or, a few yards to go for it. And 9 times out of 10, he punted it. Was the overcautious coaching posture of Todd Bowles, was that one of the Achilles heels of this team as well? It seems to me like Tom Brady really excels when he can kind of make the offensive calls and he can be a gunslinger out there. I think to a certain extent, he felt handcuffed under the Todd Bowles administration. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that if Todd Bowles would have gone for it a couple more times on fourth downs in certain games, we would have been over 500. We would have had maybe 2-3 more wins than we did. We would have been better positioned to get into the next round of the playoffs. Like at the end of the day, I do think the main issue with this team was the offensive play calling. But that is the next thing on the list. It is the passive calls on fourth and short around midfield, the inexplicable 55+ yard punt or kick or field goal attempts for Ryan Suckup that are just well out of his range, that are just giving the team a free possession at the 50-yard line. I mean, the decisions that he was making all season, they're fireable in my opinion. I think the only real reason he's able to keep his job, if I'm being honest, is the fact that he's able to say, oh, the offense sucked. Let me get a new guy in here that can do what we want and we can turn it around next season.
Yeah, so when we take a look at this team in a post-mortem, we say, what went wrong? What went right? There wasn't a lot that went right. I got to be honest with you. Why not fire Todd Bowles? Why not just make it a complete clean slate? Why leave one guy? Or is there another guy that they're pursuing and they're just waiting to solidify that? And then Bowles is just going to get off the wall too. It's going to be a bit of an interesting thing. Do you believe that Bowles will be back next year? I hear Greg Auman and I hear Rick Stroud. They all believe that he will be back next year. Is that your belief?
That is my belief. I've covered the team this season. I've been up in that press box sitting around Greg Auman and Rick Stroud, Pewter Report, the guys from Pewter Report. And everyone up there is thinking that Todd Bowles is not going to get fired. And I'm under that same impression. I mean, we know the season was bad and we've seen a lot that he could do better, a lot that he could do much better. But there are very few times when a coach goes one and done, 1 year and you're done. And I just don't think the Glazers and Jason Light are going to say, okay, we made it to the playoffs with a horrible offense. Let's see what we can do to help Todd next year, help Bowles next year, and see how we can improve, see how we can build off of this to get back to that area that we should be.
And I'm just going to give an honest assessment here. So we've kind of looked at the head coaching position and all that kind of thing. But in all fairness, Tom Brady was not Tom Brady this last season. You saw the ball get thrown short. You saw the ball get thrown over. You saw Evans and Godwin running the wrong routes. It's like someone took the snow globe and shook it up and said, let's just screw everything up. So there's that, plus all the myriad of injuries on this team. If you can kind of trace back when things kind of started to go off the rails, it was in the preseason for me. Everyone was hyped up about this team because they signed, Russell Gage and Julio Jones and all these guys. And they were like, this team is going to be so stacked. They're going to be tripping over each other. And then Ryan Jensen got injured. And I'm like, well, no one planned for this. And it just seemed like the wheel really started to wobble after that. And the team really started to tailspin. So in an honest assessment, we know Tom Brady, he had a personal issues. He got divorced. There was a whole cryptocurrency thing. A lot of the blame does lie on Tom Brady. How much of the blame for the Bucs' poor season lies on Brady's shoulders?
It's a good question. I think, there's a lot of factors that go into when a team fails. And obviously, eyes are always going to turn to the quarterback. And I agree with you. Tom Brady was bad this year. This is not like the typical Tom Brady season that we know that we have all seen for the last 25 years. This was a bad season by Tom Brady. However, I think the blame probably lies with him pretty low, honestly. Like, even if he completed some passes that he threw in the dirt or overthrew, or if Mike Evans ran the right route, I truly don't see any way that this offense improves at all. I mean, um, just about all the offensive issues stemmed from the play calling with me. Uh, there was just no real adaptability, no real, oh, this is going wrong. We need to change it and do this. That never happened. This is an archaic offense that really relies on high level execution, and we didn't get that high level execution, and the play calling remained the same. So while the execution could have been better, week 4, when we saw things were going wrong, offensive adjustments should have been happening, and we should be trying to help our quarterback and help our receivers get open and that kind of thing. So I think the majority of it lands with the offensive coaching staff, with Brady getting the rest, because I mean the offense runs through the quarterback, so needs to be good.
So then, kind of just going back here a little bit to Byron Leftwich, he was the offensive coach when they won the Super Bowl. He's the same guy. I understand Bruce Arians isn't pushing the buttons or pulling the strings, but intrinsically, it's the same team. What changed? Everyone wants to fault Byron Leftwich, but he's the same man with a lot of the same tools at his disposal. What went wrong with Byron Leftwich?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it again. It was the first year without an offensive genius looking over his shoulder, just someone that knows when to call the right play and do this and do that. Brady, I mean, like I said earlier, this offense, you need tip-top execution, and we didn't have that. So Leftwich's inability to adapt and inability to modernize his offense, coupled with just below average execution from our offense, those put together really just threw the season awry and made everything go off the rails. When people say that Byron Leftwich was the offensive coordinator of a Super Bowl winning team, I say, yeah, he was. Again, Bruce Arians was there. The offense looks roughly similar. Obviously, you don't have Antonio Brown, you don't have Rob Gronkowski, which are two huge pieces that are gone. But I think when you look at the play calling and you see first down runs every drive, and you see screens to Chris Godwin every other play, defenses key in on that. And they're able to say, okay, this amount of time on this set play, say 1st and 7 or 2nd and 7, the Bucs are likely going to run. So they're able to key in on the run. And when they do run, the Bucs likely get less than 3 yards. That happened all season. That has happened for the last 2 years. Like I said, the writing's been on the wall for this firing, I think, for Byron Leftwich for a couple years. I don't think by any means the play calling in those Super Bowl and the Rams playoff game last year were good by any means. I think they were pretty bad by NFL standards. I just think the execution from the offense was able to mask it because they were playing so well. I think if you stick a modern just offense that can adapt with a smarter, more ready offensive coordinator, someone who has a better feel for the game in this year's offense, I think we see a much different Buccaneers team. I think we don't go under 500, and I think we probably advance quite far in the playoffs because, the NFC was, aside from the Eagles, kind of up in the air this year. I truly believe that if there was any ounce of just changes made to this offense this year, that things would have been much different.
And one of the claims that was made against Leftwich in the offense is that it was predictable. He never really seemed to adjust. And if you watch the best of the best, if there's any sort of failure out on the field, if the offense isn't performing, they change things up. They don't keep going to the same set plays again and again. And kind of to your point there, that's one of the things that I think Bruce Arians kind of oversaw. And, he, offered his opinion on it as well. The interesting thing for next year is that Todd Bowles, assuming that he is still the head coach, is that is he in fact going to name a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator? And I just, I don't think that he's totally dialed in with being a head coach. I really don't. There's just so many timeout situations and so many just different situations where you can tell that his kind of he's not a veteran, shall we say, at the head coaching position, kind of came into focus. I do think that he should add, some more coaches to the system that can kind of whisper in his ear, like say, hey, it'd probably be a pretty good idea if you took a timeout right now or something like that. I do think that he needs to bolster that coaching staff, but everything that I've heard is that they're going to be making cuts, and some of the coaches that were let go, they're not going to be replacing them. What are your thoughts on that going forward?
Yeah, that's not something that I was a fan of seeing either. I totally agree. I heard someone, I can't remember exactly who it was, midseason say that the Buccaneers are a team with a defensive coordinator and an offensive coordinator, and one of them is kind of just acting like the head coach for a little bit. Todd Bowles needs someone else to help him manage the defense on a day-to-day basis, help him manage the defense in the games, because it can get, I'm sure, I don't know from experience, but I am sure it can get overwhelming in a game when you are trying to manage defense and just everything else that a head coach has to worry about. Because, head coach, you're still watching offense, you're still watching special teams, you're doing all the player management things that need to be done. There's no head coach in the league that is successful doing it alone. So if I think Todd Bowles wants to improve his tenure as a head coach, kind of improve off last year, he needs someone. He needs a defensive coordinator who can help him with the day-to-day and the details just during the game, because it didn't work last season, and lessening the people around you is only going to make it harder. So.
And the thing of it is, too, is it's going to be a tall order, like we talked about, who is going to be returning to this team. And just taking a look at the list, we all kind of can agree on, I think, the fact that Brady will not be back. But some of the marquee names that will be free agents in March, huge names on this team. Levante David, one of the biggest ones, I got to say, without him on this team, that changes a lot. Jamal Dean, Sean Murphy Bunting, who, has suffered from a lot of injuries, but I think plays pretty good at the corner position. Anthony Nelson, Mike Edwards, Akeem Hicks, and then there's just a myriad of other names, Nassib Jones, Golston, Ryan. So, but the marquee names, for me is Levante David, Jamal Dean, Sean Murphy Bunting. Of those players, in your assessment, which ones are the most paramount for coming back? I put that on, coming to terms with Levante David and having him coming back to this team. Who are, players that must come back to this team next year?
Yeah, so I agree with you. Levante David's number one on my list. Number two, I immediately turned to Jamel Dean. I think he was our best corner, the Bucs' best corner this year. He's playing at a really high level, great athleticism, great ball skills. Without him, we really have no one, because, like you said, Sean Murphy Bunting is a free agent, and I'm not super thrilled with the idea of him as a cornerback too. I don't really think he can play up to that level consistently enough for me to be comfortable with that. And then you turn to the draft where there's other needs. You never really know how the board's going to fall. So I think bringing back Jamel Dean and Levante David have to be your must-do things on your to-do list. Like, everyone else can go. You can fill in with free agents. Those are the two you need to bring back if I'm Jason Light. And then I would hope you'd be able to bring back a couple other guys for depth. Like, I'd like to see Will Golston back. Anthony Nelson, I'd like to come back as well. But the put a star next to Jamel Dean and Levante David for sure.
Yeah, just finding a way. And, that's the question. I bet you they're going to want to say, well, it depends. Who's our QB going to be? I think that, at the end of the day, there's team loyalty to an extent. But if you're an NFL player, you know that you have a limited career. If I was a player, which I'm not, but if I was, I would go for the most money possible because, I mean, let's face it, the Buccaneers probably are not going to be in the playoff next year. Bucs fans, I'm sorry, but have a come to Jesus moment with me here. I just kind of take a look at who's out there. So one of the players that could have really changed the Bucs' fortune this year is Ryan Jensen, Pro Bowler. He ended up sharing that I ended up tearing my MCL, ACL, and my PCL. I've never even heard of a PCL until this moment right now. I got to be honest with you. So a very unique injury, suffices to say. But the interesting thing is he said it didn't require a surgery on it. So it's odd that there is that kind of injury. He also said I had a fracture and another little bone chip thing. It was a major injury. I was fortunate as I could have had to have surgery. So an interesting thing, but, taking a look at Jensen, how much better would this Bucs team have been this year? Kind of just pontificating here and spitballing here. How much better would the Bucs have been if Jensen would have been in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, looking at how the team lined up in that Dallas game, you had from left to right tackle, Donovan Smith, Luke Gedeke, Ryan Jensen, Shaq Mason, and then Tristan Wirfs. The right side of your line is solid. Don't have to mess with that. That's amazing. Hainsey, I think, filling in for Jensen this year was good. I thought he played some good football. I thought he was a very good center who was able to just keep things moving. Turmoil at left guard. We know that. Luke Gedeke did not play well in the first half of the season. They replaced him with Nick Leverett. And then there was a little bit of stability with Leverett, who played okay. Donovan Smith had a horrible year. Everyone has been watching him. It's just been bad every single game. With Jensen, I would like to think that they put Hainsey at left guard and then Donovan Smith at left tackle. And that, I think, limits your issues to left tackle rather than left tackle and left guard. That's a whole side of your offensive line that is struggling rather than one single position where you can kind of shift over help. Jensen back would have done wonders. I mean, that guy, probably when he's healthy, the best center in football, I think. Him and Jason Kelce are just top tier, top two, like no doubt in my mind. Hainsey was fine. I think he did a good job filling in, but that just limits the depth you have at the position and the options you're able to do when people get hurt or people start struggling. So yeah, like I said, with Jensen back, it would have opened up so many opportunities for Hainsey to shift to left guard and I think do a good job there as well. So it would have made a world of difference.
And, it's easy to look at this, from afar as I sit here in my chair as an armchair quarterback saying, I would have done this and I would have done that. Who ultimately knows at the end of the day what difference it would have made? Garrett, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Bucs Report. Why don't you tell everyone where we can find your work?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at NFL Ballard. That's NFL Ballard. I cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Sports Talk Florida, so you could find all my written work there. I have a link in my Twitter bio, and I tweet out all my articles. I got a preview of some offensive coordinator candidates coming out tomorrow, so keep an eye out on Twitter for that. That's really it. I mean, I do a podcast with JT Olson, Bucs Report writer, great guy, Creamsicle Chronicles podcast. You can follow that on Twitter at Creamsicle Crew with the K. That's pretty much it. So.
All right. Sounds great. Once again, thanks for joining us on this edition of the Bucs Report, and I'll talk to you again next time.